Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was working as a receptionist at a small insurance office in the UK. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills while I was saving up for university. The office was one of those older buildings with thick walls and tiny windows that barely let in any light. The heating worked fine in winter, but come summer, the place turned into an oven. No air conditioning, just a couple of ancient fans that barely moved the stale air around. I've been working there for about 8 months when this whole mess started. The job itself was pretty straightforward: answer phones, greet clients, handle basic paperwork. Nothing too complicated. My manager was this woman in her 50s who'd been running the place for years. She was one of those people who loved rules for the sake of rules. The office had this policy about no food or drink at the front desk. Fair enough, I thought. You don't want crumbs getting in the keyboard or spilling coffee on important documents. I never had a problem with it during the cooler months. I just drink my tea in the break room during my breaks, and that was that. But then summer hit, and I mean really hit. We had this brutal heat wave that lasted for weeks. The temperature outside was pushing 35 degrees, and inside our little office, it felt even hotter. The air was thick and stuffy, and by midday I could feel sweat sticking to my shirt. The fans weren't doing much except pushing hot air around. I started bringing a small water bottle to work, nothing fancy, just a basic plastic bottle. I kept it tucked behind my computer monitor where clients couldn't see it. I'd take small sips throughout the day when no one was looking. It wasn't like I was chugging water or making a show of it. I was just trying not to pass out from the heat. This went on for about a week without any issues. Then one afternoon, while I was dealing with a difficult client on the phone, my manager walked past my desk. I didn't think anything of it at first. She was always walking around checking on things. But about an hour later, she came back and stood right in front of my desk. She told me she needed to speak with me about something. When I asked what was up, she said she'd noticed my water bottle behind the monitor. I started to explain that it had been so hot lately and I thought it would be okay, but she cut me off. She told me absolutely no drinks were allowed at the desk and that the policy was clear. I tried to reason with her, explaining that it was just water and I'd been keeping it hidden so clients couldn't see it, but she wasn't having any of it. She said it didn't matter if it was hot because rules were rules. The policy said no food or drink at the front desk, and that meant no exceptions. I was a bit stunned. I mean, we're talking about water here, not a full meal or anything messy. But she was standing there with her arms crossed, looking at me like I'd committed some serious crime. I asked her if she really meant even water wasn't allowed. She confirmed that yes, even water was banned. She told me to take it to the break room if I needed to drink something. I asked what I was supposed to do if I got thirsty during the day, since I couldn't just leave the desk whenever I wanted. She reminded me that I had scheduled breaks and told me to use them for drinking water. And with that, she walked away. I sat there for a moment, looking at my little water bottle like it was contraband. The whole thing felt ridiculous, but I wasn't about to argue with her in front of clients. I put the bottle in my bag and figured I'd deal with it. The next morning, I decided to follow her rules to the letter. No water bottle at my desk. If she wanted to be that strict about it, fine. I'd show her exactly what that meant. By 11 in the morning, I was already feeling parched. The heat was even worse than the day before, and without my water bottle, I was starting to feel uncomfortable. But I stuck to my guns. Rules are rules, right? Lunchtime came and went. I drank as much water as I could during my 30-minute break, but it wasn't enough. By 2 p.m., I was feeling dizzy and lightheaded. My mouth was dry and I could feel that familiar, fuzzy feeling that comes with dehydration. I looked at the clock. My next scheduled break wasn't for another 2 hours, but I was genuinely worried about my health at this point. The room felt like it was spinning slightly, and I knew I needed water immediately. So I stood up, walked away from my desk, and went straight to the break room. I grabbed a cup and filled it with cold water from the cooler, drinking it down in one go. Then I filled it again and drank that too. I could feel myself starting to feel human again. That's when she appeared in the doorway. She demanded to know why I wasn't at my desk. I simply told her I needed water. She said I couldn't just leave my post whenever I felt like it. She pointed out that there were clients waiting and the phones were ringing. I explained that she had told me yesterday that I couldn't have any drinks at the desk. Since I needed water, I had to come to the break room to get it. She got frustrated and said that wasn't what she meant, and I knew it. But I stood my ground and told her that was exactly what she had meant. I reminded her that she had said absolutely no drinks at the desk, even water. So when I needed water, I had to come to the break room. She stood there for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Behind her, I could hear the phones ringing constantly. Through the break room window, I could see 3 clients standing around the reception area, looking confused and increasingly annoyed. She called the whole situation ridiculous and accused me of being deliberately difficult. But I maintained that I was simply following the rules exactly as she had explained them to me. No drinks at the desk meant no drinks at the desk. The phones kept ringing. One of the clients had walked up to the empty reception desk and was looking around, clearly frustrated. Another client had just walked in and was standing there with no one to greet them. She ordered me to get back to my desk right away. I told her I would as soon as I finished drinking water. I explained that since I couldn't have any at my desk, I needed to make sure I was properly hydrated before going back. I took my time finishing my water, refilling the cup one more time. The whole time I could hear the chaos building in the reception area, phones ringing, clients getting impatient, the usual sounds of an office that wasn't running smoothly. When I finally walked back to my desk, there were 4 clients waiting and 2 phones still ringing. I apologized to everyone and got back to work, but the damage was done. The clients were frustrated, and it took me a good 20 minutes to get everything sorted out. About an hour later, my manager came back to my desk. She looked tired and stressed, probably from dealing with the fallout of the chaotic afternoon. She said we needed to talk about what had happened earlier. I asked her what about it. She told me I couldn't just abandon my post like that because it was unprofessional. I responded that I wasn't abandoning anything and was simply following the policy she had explained to me yesterday. She suggested there might have been a misunderstanding. I asked if there really was one because she had been pretty clear that absolutely no drinks were allowed at the desk, even water. She was quiet for a moment, looking around the office. A few clients were still sitting in the waiting area, and I could see her calculating how much business we might have lost because of the afternoon's chaos. She said we needed to use some common sense. I asked her what she meant by common sense. She explained that, obviously, if I needed water for health reasons, that was different. I asked if that meant I could have water at my desk. She said I could, but it had to be discreet and behind the monitor where clients couldn't see it. I asked if she meant just like I was doing before. She confirmed that yes, just like I was doing before, and that was it. My little water bottle went right back to its spot behind my monitor, and she never said another word about it. The next week, she actually had maintenance install a small fan at my desk to help with the heat. I stayed at that job for another 6 months before finally moving on to something better. But I never forgot that day. I thought I had found the one. We met at a coffee shop downtown where I was working on my laptop trying to finish a project for my freelance graphic design business. She approached me with this bright smile and asked if she could sit at my table since everywhere else was full. That was 2 years ago. I had been living in this small rental house for about 3 years before we even started dating. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I paid the rent every month, handled all the utilities, and slowly made it feel like home. When we got serious after about 6 months of dating, she mentioned how cramped her studio apartment was and how expensive rent was getting. Being the guy I am, I offered to let her move in with me. She could help with groceries and maybe chip in for utilities, but I'd handle the rent since I was already established there. About a year into living together, I decided I wanted a dog. I'd always been a dog person, and having a backyard finally made it possible. She wasn't thrilled about the idea at first. She complained about how much work dogs were and worried about the mess and smell they'd create. I promised her I'd handle everything from walking to feeding to training and she wouldn't have to do anything she didn't want to do. She warmed up to the idea, especially after we went to the shelter and she saw this adorable mixed breed with the biggest brown eyes. We brought him home that day and I kept my promise. I took him for walks every morning and evening, cleaned up any accidents, fed him, and even paid for professional training classes because I wanted him to be well behaved. She'd pet him and play with him sometimes, but the daily care was all on me. Things were good for a while. We had our routine, shared expenses for food and small things, and I thought we were building something together. I even opened a joint savings account where we could both put money aside for future plans. I was putting in about 80% of what went into that account since my business was doing well, but she contributed what she could from her part-time retail job. Then everything changed about 2 months ago. She got back in touch with her ex, the one from before we met. At first, she said they were just talking as friends, catching up on old times. But I could see something shifting. She became distant, started staying out later, and would get defensive whenever I asked about her day. One evening, I found her texting someone and smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in weeks. When I asked who had her grinning like that, she brushed it off and said it was just a friend I didn't know. I pressed her about whether it was her ex and she got annoyed, asking why it mattered since they were just talking. But it wasn't just talking. Within a week, she told me we needed to have a serious conversation. She explained that she'd been thinking a lot lately and didn't think our relationship was working anymore. She wanted to get back together with her ex because she felt they had something special and could make it work this time. I was stunned. 2 years together and she was throwing it all away to go back to someone who had already hurt her once. I asked if she was serious and she said she knew it was sudden, but couldn't help how she felt. That conversation happened 3 weeks ago, and ever since then, she's been impossible to deal with. Instead of just packing her things and leaving like a normal person, she started making demands. She wanted half of everything we had bought together, including the furniture, kitchen stuff, savings account, and even the dog. I reminded her that she never even wanted the dog in the first place and that this was my house that I was living in before she moved in. She argued that we'd been together for 2 years and she had rights. I pointed out that we weren't married and she didn't have rights to my house or my dog. She said she wasn't leaving without getting what was fair. She wanted to move in with her ex, but apparently he still lived with his parents and there wasn't room for her stuff. So her brilliant plan was to kick me out of my own place and take half of everything, including the dog she never took care of. I tried to be reasonable about it. I offered to split the money in our joint account 50-50, even though I had put in most of it. But I wasn't giving up my house or my dog. The situation got worse when I came home from a client meeting last Tuesday to find my dog missing. I searched the backyard, called his name, and checked all his usual spots. That's when I decided to review the security cameras I had installed a few months earlier. There she was, on the footage, sneaking around the side of the house where she knew the camera angle was blocked, getting into the backyard through the gate and calling for the dog. She knew about the dog door that led from the kitchen to the backyard so he could come and go as he pleased. What she apparently forgot was that the cameras also record sound. Her voice was clear as day when she called for him and told him they were going on a little trip. She tried to avoid the cameras, but then shouted loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I went straight to the police station with the footage. The officer explained that since we two lived together and weren't married, this became a civil matter. Without clear evidence that we had officially broken up or that she was trespassing, they couldn't file charges. He said that from what he could see, she had access to the property as a resident, and I'd need to handle this through civil court or work it out between ourselves. I left the police station frustrated but not defeated. I knew where she was staying, her parents' house across town. I drove over there and knocked on the door. Her mother answered, and I could hear my dog barking excitedly in the background when he heard my voice. I explained to her mother that I just wanted my dog back because she had taken him without permission. Her mother said that her daughter claimed it was her dog too. I told her that I had paid for him, trained him, and taken care of him every single day, and that her daughter never even wanted a dog. I could hear him getting more excited, probably trying to get to the door. Her mother was only opening it part way, clearly trying to keep him from running to me. I asked if I could at least see him because he was probably confused about why I hadn't been around. She said it would be better if I just left and closed the door on me mid-conversation. I stood there for a moment, listening to him barking and scratching at the door. It broke my heart, but I had one more card to play. Our joint savings account still had about $8,000 in it. We had agreed when we were together that if we ever broke up, we'd split it 50-50, even though I had contributed most of it. Fair was fair, or so I thought. I went home and transferred all the money into a cryptocurrency wallet. It was risky, but I had a plan. I waited 2 days, just long enough for her to check the account, and realized the money was gone. My phone rang on Friday morning and she was furious, demanding to know what I had done with our money. I told her I had invested it in cryptocurrency, which was pretty volatile right now, so it could go up or down quickly. She called me insane and reminded me that it was our emergency fund. I told her to relax because I could cash it out anytime, but I had a proposition for her. She asked what kind of proposition, so I explained that she could choose between giving me back my dog and splitting the money, like we agreed, or keeping the dog and letting me keep all the money. There was a long pause before she protested that it wasn't fair because the money was half hers. I reminded her that the dog was all mine and asked what it was going to be. She accused me of blackmail, but I corrected her and said it was just a choice between the dog or money, but she couldn't have both. After another long pause, she agreed to give me back the dog but demanded her half of the money immediately. I told her we had a deal and that I'd cash out and transfer her half when I had the dog back at my house. She agreed to bring him over that afternoon. When she showed up, she barely looked at him when he jumped all over me, tail wagging like crazy. She just wanted to get it over with and asked where her money was. I told her I had some bad news. When she asked what kind of bad news, I explained that cryptocurrency was volatile, like I had mentioned, and it had crashed right after I bought in. I had lost everything and asked what were the odds of that happening. She accused me of lying, but I said I wished I was and that I was just upset about it. I called it quite a gamble that turned out badly. She demanded to see the account, so I offered to show her the wallet but explained there was nothing left to see because sometimes you win and sometimes you lose with crypto. She stood there for a moment, probably trying to figure out if I was telling the truth or if she had any legal recourse. She turned and walked back to her car without another word. After she left, I installed 2 more security cameras to cover those dead angles she knew about. My dog and I settled into our new routine as bachelors. He seems much happier now that the tension in the house is gone, and I don't have to listen to complaints about dog hair or the occasional accident. Cryptocurrency really is unpredictable. I've been running my family restaurant for 8 years now. Started it right after culinary school with my savings and a small loan from my parents. It's nothing fancy, just good comfort food at reasonable prices. We serve burgers, pasta, steaks, and daily specials. My head chef has been with me for 5 years and he's solid. Never had any major complaints about his cooking until that Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. It was around 2 p.m., right in the middle of our lunch rush. The dining room was packed with the usual crowd of office workers grabbing a quick bite. I was managing the front of house when this woman walked in. She had this attitude from the moment she stepped through the door, looking around like our place wasn't good enough for her. She demanded the best table even though we had a wait list, but I managed to seat her at a decent spot by the window. From the start, she was difficult. She questioned our server about every single ingredient in multiple dishes, complained about the music being too loud, then too quiet, and sent back her water because it wasn't cold enough. I could see our server getting frustrated, but we deal with difficult customers all the time. Nothing too unusual yet. She finally ordered our signature chicken parmesan with a side of garlic mashed potatoes. Simple enough. My chef prepared it perfectly, same way he's made it hundreds of times before. But when the server brought it out, she immediately called him back over. She complained that the chicken was dry and overcooked, calling it garbage and demanding that the server take it back and tell the chef to make it right this time. The server brought it back to the kitchen. My chef looked confused because the chicken looked fine to him, but he made another one anyway. Customer service and all that. Second plate goes out, and within 5 minutes she was calling the server again. She said this one was even worse than the first and asked what kind of establishment we were running. She demanded to speak to the manager immediately. That's when I went over to her table. I tried to be diplomatic, offered to comp her meal, suggested other dishes she might prefer, but she wasn't having any of it. She told me she didn't want anything else from this pathetic excuse for a restaurant and wanted the chef to come out and explain why he couldn't cook a simple piece of chicken properly. I explained that I was the owner and I was there to resolve the issue, but the chef was busy with other orders. She said she didn't care if I was the owner, the president, or the Pope. She wanted that incompetent chef out there immediately, or she was going to make sure everyone knew how terrible this place was. She was getting louder, and other customers were starting to stare. I offered her a full refund and asked her to lower her voice. That's when she really lost it. She yelled at me not to tell her to lower her voice, saying she was the customer and would speak however she wanted. If the chef wouldn't come out to her, then she would go back to him herself. Before I could stop her, she stood up and walked toward the kitchen. I followed right behind her, trying to get her to come back to her table. The kitchen door swung open and she burst in like she owned the place. My chef was working on 3 different orders when she stormed in. The kitchen was hot, busy, and definitely not a place for customers. He looked up surprised and confused. He told her she couldn't be back there because it was a working kitchen. She screamed at him, asking what was wrong with him and why he kept ruining her food. She demanded to know if he could even cook a simple piece of chicken. My chef explained that he had made her dish exactly how they always made it, and if she didn't like it, they could try something else, but she needed to go back to her table. She yelled at him not to tell her what she needed to do, calling him incompetent and threatening to make sure everyone knew it. She started screaming at him while he was trying to work. My other kitchen staff stopped what they were doing because the situation was getting out of hand. I was trying to get her to leave the kitchen, but she was completely focused on my chef. My chef pleaded with her to just go back to her seat so they could figure things out, but she refused and said he was going to listen to her right then and there. That's when things went from bad to dangerous. She noticed the pan of oil my chef had been using to fry some appetizers. It was still hot, probably around 350 degrees. She reached for it before anyone could react. She said that maybe throwing hot oil would teach him to cook properly. She grabbed the handle and swung it toward my chef. Thank God he saw it coming and jumped backward. The oil splashed across the floor where he had been standing just a second before. If he hadn't moved, it would have hit him directly in the chest and face. The kitchen erupted. My sous chef immediately tackled her from behind while my prep cook grabbed her arms. She was still screaming and trying to fight them off, but they managed to get her on the ground and hold her there. I shouted for someone to call 911 right away. My server was already on the phone with the police. Karen kept yelling about how we were assaulting her and threatening to sue everyone. She tried to claim that she was just trying to show my chef how hot the oil was, but we all saw her swing that pan at him with full force. The police arrived within 10 minutes. They took statements from everyone who witnessed what happened. The whole thing was caught on our security cameras too, which made their job easier. Karen tried to play the victim, saying we had attacked her first, but the video evidence was pretty clear. The officer told her she was under arrest for assault with a dangerous weapon and read her rights. When they put the handcuffs on her, she was still yelling about how unfair it all was and demanding to speak to their supervisor. The other customers had mostly cleared out by then, which I couldn't blame them for. We had to shut down the kitchen for the rest of the day to clean up the oil and deal with the police investigation. My chef was pretty shaken up, understandably. Hot oil can cause third-degree burns instantly, and if it had hit his face, it could have blinded him or worse. The whole incident cost us probably $2,000 in lost business and cleaning costs. We also had to hire a lawyer to deal with the legal side of things, since Karen initially tried to sue us for restraining her. Turns out this wasn't her first rodeo. The police told us she had previous arrests for similar incidents at other businesses. Apparently, she had a pattern of causing scenes in restaurants and retail stores when things didn't go exactly her way. 3 months later, we got the call that she had been sentenced to 18 months in prison for assault with a dangerous weapon. Plus, she had to pay restitution for our damages and court costs. The judge apparently wasn't impressed with her excuse that she was just trying to make a point about customer service. My chef still works for me, and he's never had another incident like that. We did install a better security system, and now we have a strict policy about customers entering the kitchen area. We also trained all our staff on how to handle aggressive customers before they escalate to that level. When we reviewed the security footage later, we could see that both plates of chicken she sent back looked perfectly fine. She was just looking for a reason to cause trouble from the moment she walked in. I met my husband when I was 17, fresh out of high school working at a local coffee shop, and he was this charming guy who came in every morning for his usual black coffee and blueberry muffin. We clicked instantly over our shared love of terrible horror movies. By the time I turned 19, we were living together in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with the world's smallest bathroom. That bathroom had one of those old-fashioned tub and shower combos with a diverter valve. You know the type, there's a little metal rod sticking out of the tub faucet that you push down to fill the tub and pull up to switch the water to the shower head. The very first week we lived together, I learned about my husband's little quirk. He'd tested for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but didn't actually have it. Instead, he had what he called executive function issues that made certain tasks feel impossible for him. When I asked him why he couldn't just do simple organizational things, he told me it sounded dramatic, but when he tried to do those things, it was like his brain just shut down. He said he'd rather deal with problems when they came up than try to prevent them. I pointed out that some things were so simple though, like just remembering to push the shower thing down when he was done. He promised he'd try to remember. That was nearly 20 years ago. 20 freaking years. At least twice a month, sometimes more, I'd stumble into the bathroom for my morning shower. I'd lean in to turn on the water, expecting it to come out of the faucet like normal, and instead get blasted in the face and hair with ice-cold water from the shower head above, because he'd left the diverter pulled up from his shower the night before. Every single time the conversation was the same. I'd tell him he left the shower diverter up again. He'd apologize profusely and say he completely forgot and promised to be more careful. I'd remind him that he said that last time and the time before that. He'd acknowledge this but insist he was really working on it and ask if he hadn't been better about it lately. And you know what? Sometimes he would be better. For a few weeks or even a month, he'd remember to push it down. I'd start to think maybe this time it had finally stuck. Then boom, cold water to the face at 6 in the morning when I was already running late for work. The worst part wasn't even the cold water. It was the apologies. The endless, meaningless apologies followed by the same speech about how he was working on it and getting better. 20 years of the same conversation. 20 years of me asking for the most basic consideration and getting nothing but empty promises. I tried everything. I left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror. I bought a waterproof marker and wrote reminders on the shower wall. I even suggested we take turns showering first so I wouldn't have to deal with it. But he always had an excuse. He told me the notes just became background noise after a while and he stopped seeing them. He said he couldn't shower first in the mornings because he needed more time to wake up. Then he suggested that maybe I could just check before I turned the water on. That last suggestion made me see red. Why should I have to check? I always left things the way I found them. When I used the shower, I pushed the diverter down afterward so the next person wouldn't get sprayed. It was basic courtesy. But apparently basic courtesy was too much to ask for. This morning was the final straw. I'd had a terrible night's sleep because our neighbor's dog had been barking until 3 in the morning. I stumbled into the bathroom desperate for a hot shower to help me feel human again. I reached in to turn the water on and wham, ice-cold water straight to my face and down my pajama top. I stood there dripping and shivering, and something inside me just snapped. 20 years. 20 freaking years of this bull crap. I was done asking nicely. I was done accepting apologies that meant nothing. I was done being treated like a second-class citizen in my own home. I grabbed a plastic cup from beside the sink and filled it with cold water from the tap. Then I walked out to the bedroom where my husband was standing naked, having just taken off his pajamas to get ready for his own shower. Without saying a word, I lifted that cup and threw the entire contents right at his chest and face. He gasped and stumbled backward, water dripping down his body. He demanded to know what the hell that was for. I told him his apologies were worth the paper they were written on. I said I was tired of listening to him congratulate himself for getting better when I've been asking him to stop this crap for 20 years. He protested that it was an accident and apologized again. I told him I didn't accept his apology. I explained that the fact it was an accident didn't excuse it anymore. I said that from now on, every time I got a surprise cold shower, so would he. I said I refused to be a second-class citizen in my own home any longer. I told him if he wouldn't make changes to treat me better, I'd make changes to treat him worse because I would not tolerate this anymore. He asked if I was serious. I said I was dead serious. I told him I was done begging for basic freaking respect. I reminded him he'd had 20 years to figure this out and clearly asking nicely didn't work. He stood there sputtering about how this was unreasonable and how I couldn't just throw water at him every time I was upset. I told him to watch me. I was already walking back to the bathroom to take my shower after checking that the diverter was pushed down, of course. Later that day, I found him in the kitchen looking sheepish. He said he'd been thinking about what happened that morning. I asked him what his conclusion was. He told me he'd set a reminder on his phone that would go off every night at 10 p.m. to remind him to check the shower. I told him we'd see how long that lasted. He insisted he was serious this time and said he didn't realize how much this was affecting me. I asked him how he didn't realize after 20 years of me telling him exactly how much it was affecting me. He didn't have an answer for that. 3 days later, I got another cold shower surprise. This time, I didn't even bother getting angry. I just filled up that cup again and found him in the living room watching TV. When that cold water hit him, it was almost worth 20 years of frustration. He complained that he forgot to check his phone reminder. I told him that wasn't my problem. It's been 2 weeks now and I've had to douse him with cold water 3 more times. I don't really know if I'm in the wrong here. I've been teaching at this inner city school for about 5 years now. It's not the easiest job, but I love working with these kids. They come from tough backgrounds, and sometimes school is the only stable thing in their lives. My daughter goes to daycare near the school, which makes drop-offs pretty convenient most days. I usually get to work around 7:05, grab my coffee, and prep for the day. My contract officially starts at 7:10, so I've always had a few minutes to settle in. About 2 months ago, the daycare started construction on their parking lot. Instead of the usual quick drop-off, I had to park across the street and walk my daughter to the building. The whole process took an extra 5 to 7 minutes, which meant I was getting to school around 7:12 or 7:15 instead of my usual time. I didn't think much of it at first. I was still getting everything done before classes started, and the kids weren't affected. But apparently the administration was keeping track. After about 2 weeks of this routine, the principal called me into her office. She told me we needed to discuss my recent tardiness. I was confused and told her I didn't understand what she meant since I was here before classes started every day. She explained that my contract clearly said I was required to be here at 7:10 and I've been arriving at 7:12 to 7:15 consistently. I explained that it was just a few minutes because of my daughter's daycare construction, that it was temporary, and it didn't affect my teaching. She said that wasn't the point. I was paid to work from 7:10 to 2:22, and those were my contractual hours that I needed to honor. She handed me a disciplinary form to sign. The whole thing felt ridiculous, but I signed it anyway. I figured I'd just have to leave my daughter a few minutes earlier until the construction was done. She told me that going forward, I needed to make sure I was here on time because they expected professionalism from their staff. I said I understood. What made this whole situation even more frustrating was what I did after school every day. Once classes ended at 2:02, I would head to the school's weight room and open it up for any athletes who wanted to work out. I'd been doing this for almost 3 years. See, I played college football and spent a lot of time in the gym during and after my playing days. These kids didn't have access to proper strength training otherwise. Their coaches didn't arrive until 3:15 for official practice, so this gave the athletes an extra hour to work on their fitness. I never asked for extra pay. I did it because I genuinely enjoyed helping these kids get stronger and more confident. The athletes loved having the extra time. The coaches appreciated that their players were getting additional training, and I felt like I was making a real difference. But technically, my contract ended at 2:22. I was volunteering my time for over an hour every day. A few weeks after the tardiness meeting, my wife had a doctor's appointment she couldn't reschedule. I needed to pick up my daughter from daycare early that day, which meant I couldn't stay for the weight room session. I posted a notice on the school's website that morning saying the weight room would be closed today after school but would resume tomorrow as usual. That afternoon, I left right at 2:22 when my contract ended. The next morning, I walked into chaos. The principal was waiting for me at the front door and told me we needed to talk immediately. She practically dragged me to her office where the assistant principal was already waiting. She asked if I wanted to explain what happened yesterday afternoon. I told her I had a family commitment and couldn't stay after my contractual hours. The assistant principal told me that multiple phones were stolen from the locker room, the weight room door was somehow forced open and damaged, and students were running through the hallways unsupervised. The principal added that one of our teachers was knocked down by running students and had to go to urgent care for her shoulder. I said I was sorry to hear that, but I wasn't here. She said exactly and asked why I wasn't supervising the weight room like I always do. I reminded her that she told me to work my contractual hours and I was only paid until 2:22. I mentioned that she made it very clear that I needed to honor those exact times. She said that I always stay late to watch the kids in the weight room. I explained that I did that for fun and it was completely unofficial. I reminded her that she reprimanded me for being 5 minutes late, so I figured punctuality with contract hours was very important to her. The principal's face went red. She clearly hadn't thought about the connection between her strict enforcement of my morning arrival and my voluntary afternoon supervision. The assistant principal said the weight room supervision was expected. I asked expected by whom, pointing out it wasn't in my job description, and I'd never received compensation for it. I explained that I did it because I wanted to help the kids, but apparently following contract hours to the minute was a priority here. The principal accused me of being deliberately difficult. I told her I was being exactly what she asked me to be, professional and punctual, according to my contractual obligations. They dismissed me, but I could tell they were scrambling to figure out how to handle the situation. The coaches were furious that their athletes couldn't work out safely. Parents were angry about the stolen phones. The insurance company was asking questions about the injured teacher. 2 days later, I received an email that went out to the entire district. It was a job posting for after-school weight room coach with a salary of $15,000 per year. The next day, the principal called me back to her office. She said they'd like me to apply for the new weight room position. I asked if she meant the one that pays extra money for doing exactly what I was doing for free. She said the district recognizes the value of proper after-school supervision. I asked how interesting that was and whether my contractual hours would change if I got this position. She said no, this would be in addition to my teaching duties. I clarified that I'd be paid extra to do something I was already doing voluntarily because she insisted I stick strictly to my original contract hours. She didn't answer, but the irony wasn't lost on either of us. I did apply for the position, and I got it. Now the district pays me an extra $15,000 a year to do exactly what I was doing before for free. The only difference is that now when I'm 3 minutes late in the morning, nobody says a word about it. The principal has to explain to the superintendent every year why they need to budget an extra $15,000 for weight room supervision that used to cost them nothing. Following rules exactly works out better than anyone expected. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.